Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Alright people, review of the week time. My favourite videos of the week. I love doing this. These are always probably my kind of favourite because it just gives me a chance to kind of get over stories I missed. Similar with midweek review, but with these they can just go on a bit longer and there's more stories kind of come to the end of the week and obviously fall out from cards and stuff like that. So I think that we best start with the card that happened last night. Mark McSayo upsetting. To some people it was an upset, you know. If I didn't do a prediction video on it, if I had done a prediction, and I'll be honest, I would have picked Gary Russell Jr. to win. That's who I thought would win going into this fight, but I was expecting him to have a tough fight. Not as tough as, you know, it appeared to be, because I didn't think he'd get injured. Well, I thought he might hurt his hand, but not like completely wreck his right shoulder. I didn't think that would happen. And when I was watching that fight, what actually went through my mind was, I wonder if this is because of the inactivity. Because you could say, gee, he would have sparred a lot, but would he have, you see, when you're sparring, you're obviously not going to hold back, but are you going to go hell for leather as you would? And would injuries occur as frequently as they would in the ring? You know, when you throw a punch the wrong way or something happens in the ring, in a real fight, you get an injury. And I just kind of thought, is his body, after 2 years of inactivity, was he fully ready? You know, maybe could he have had maybe a longer training camp or something like that, just to kind of get his body kind of physically into that kind of, you know, get ready to fight kind of shape? Because we complain about Russell Jr.'s inactivity. That injury will probably take another, we talk about having 3 fights this year, that ain't going to happen. And you could talk about another year out of the ring potentially, give or take. With that injury, Gary Russell Jr. is 33 years old now. The size difference, I forgot to talk about that in my post fight, the size difference in the ring really did surprise me. Because Russell Jr. had been, remember only summer of 2020, Russell Jr. was talking about going up to welterweight, because he made videos calling out Terence Crawford, I remember them. And looking at him in the ring at featherweight against McSayo, he looked small. Like, compared to Mark McSayo, he didn't look, you could tell the size difference was there in the ring. And I was like, Jesus, Russell Jr., he's not big in general, like he's quite short, but even for his like physical size, like body mass, he's very small. I mean, he's probably average size featherweight, but like even a super feather, he'd be quite a small super feather. It's crazy. He's 33 years old now. And it's a shame, because Russell Jr., I feel, so much natural talent there, so much ability, wasted through inactivity. And, you know, some people say, like, why is he inactive? Like, PBC, you know, a lot of them guys are inactive, and, you know, where's the hunger? And the way I'm looking at it is, with PBC, a lot of these guys, even for routine title defenses, like, for example, Kiko Martinez, a lot of these guys are getting in the millions. Like, what I say, in the millions, it'd be like 1.7 million or in around that. You know, we've seen that with PBC fighters before. So if you're in a main event and you're getting 1.5, 1.7 million or something like that, just to have a fight against, you know, a routine opponent, where's the motivation? Honestly, where is the motivation? Because if you go and decide, you know, put it like this, right? You could have 2 fights in a year and make the same amount of money as you would have had in a unification. You know, where is the motivation in that regard? You know, there's not much. I mean, you're literally fighting for once a year and you're making the bag every single time, because that's enough to set you up. After a couple of years, there you go, job done. So I can kind of see, it's not a good thing, but I can kind of see where, like, why he was inactive in that regard. But it's a shame, because Russell Jr., I mean, the loss against Lomachenko, which he still talks about, you know, which I think still bothers him. In hindsight, looking back, like, considering how Lomachenko was dispatched of most of his opponents, he done quite well. You know, he lost clearly, but Lomachenko, and that was one of Lomachenko's best performances as well, by the way. But nevertheless, Lomachenko had more problems with Russell Jr. than he did with, you know, plenty of guys who you might say, you know, are better, like Rigondeaux. Rigondeaux couldn't do anything. Nicholas Walters quit. Who else did he beat? Guys like Jason Sosa, Linares, Jesus, you know, Rocky Martinez. You know, compare them guys to how Russell Jr. did. Russell Jr. did much better. So I don't know. Was that the last of Russell Jr.? Potentially, he could come back. But shoulder injuries, you worry about them. You do. I'll tell you why. Because a shoulder injury can just come up like that. You know, you've seen it with, well, like Isaac Chamberlain, actually, he's been quite lucky. It's never happened again. But Danny Williams, he's had injuries. He's had nickels with his shoulder. The shoulder can pop out real easily again. So, I'll watch the space with Russell Jr. Chris Andre, we all know Chris Andre, excellent channel, one of the best on YouTube, one of the best analysts you'll find. He done an absolutely brilliant video which I watched this morning on Audley Harris. Now I wasn't actually aware of this until Chris spoke about it in his video, and I've dug these tweets up and I've seen them, and it's actually, well, there's a lot he's been basically having a go at several things, to be honest with you. And Audley's been on a rampage on Twitter today. He really truly has. He's been going hell for leather on Twitter today, having a go at Frank Warren, but specifically Carl Froch. I'm going to read this tweet verbatim here, which was tweeted the 22nd at exactly 25 minutes past 6 in the evening. Now there is one fighter I'm going to put on blast today, at Carl Froch, became really disrespectful when I lost my strength and really got it twisted with me. I remember when I was Superman, we were at the Olympic qualifiers and he was basically crying on my shoulder. I'm trying to just read here. Oh yeah, he should read. He took. I'm just trying to find out which one is which, because I'm reading these and I'm not from great with threads, so I'm just. Oh, as a boxing management. Oh, I see it here. Because I was thinking there's like 2 separate pages of it, and I was like, is this a thread or what way is it? But yeah, after he said he was crying on the shoulder, he says, as the boxing management wanted him to box on in the final after he qualified, I told him, no, don't. Save yourself for the Olympics event, and they pressured him, and I said, F him. Don't do it. He started balling for real, and I told him about sports psychology, what a book he should read. He should read that book and he took that book and became a beast. He learned to control his mindset. So do you think he should acknowledge that I helped mold his thinking instead? He started disrespecting my name and forgot where he came from. When war tamed him, I was glad. And I'm not normally spiteful like that, but Froch took the whiz. Now Superman is back. I'm letting you know, Carl Froch, that your behaviour was not cool. By the way, you would never have beaten Joe Calzaghe. Never. He was on a different level. So you need to let that you-know-what go and move on. Yeah, that was... When I was reading that, obviously the threads were kind of... I'm not great with threads and Twitter and stuff like that, but... interesting. Audley Harrison about Carl Froch, and... Carl Froch, we know what he's like. Carl Froch is like, he can never give guys credit, and he always has to bring up things about him. But with regards to what he's saying about him beating Joe, he never would have beaten Joe Calzaghe. But there was an interesting part to that he also tweeted after, was he was saying, Audley Harrison was, that there was an incident occurred in 2004. Now, he didn't elaborate on that incident. We can speculate. That really hindered his career. Now, he said he's going to be writing a book soon, which I actually wouldn't mind reading. I have a few boxing autobiographies. The best I ever read was Andy Lee's. But I'd be interested to read Audley Harrison's, no doubt. And he wants to speak to someone like Coogan about that incident that happened in 2004. Now, as I said, we can only speculate. We can only just assume, make assumptions, basically, as to what that actually is. We should hear from the horse's mouth, I would imagine, soon enough. But it's interesting. He's also like Audley Harrison. Audley was in some good fights, definitely. David Hayfight wasn't, but he was in some good ones. All right, he had to retire after the Wilder loss because of injury, because of the brain wasn't looking all that okay. But I just found it interesting that he just decided to just go hell for leather on Twitter and start mentioning Carl Froch. You mentioned no fish eyes as well. You want to be careful when you mention fish eyes, because that guy, he will take you down. Even if you're in the right, he will try everything. I mean, if you say one thing about him, God knows what he'll do. I mean, this is a man who sued the British Boxing Board of Control. So that's the story with Audley Harrison. In regards to other news, Estrada Chocolatito 3 looks set to be postponed from May the 5th. So they're probably going to bring it back a few more weeks. Estrada has the Holocaust. So yeah, I'd imagine they'll push that back probably another month or so. I was looking forward to that fight. But look, we will still get it. It's just being pushed back. With regards to other news, last week, it was interesting. Last week, WBC, in conjunction with VADA, announced several boxers that they'd taken off their list with regard, or their rankings I should say, with regards to the VADA clean boxing program. Now one of them was Conor Benn. Now I said basically, like, that doesn't really raise too many eyebrows with me, purely for the fact that Conor Benn, he's really going down the WBA road. So maybe I kind of thought to myself, maybe he's just not bothered about the WBC. Maybe he's just like, well, the WBA is the road I'm going to go down. I've mentioned Jordanis Ugas before. That's the road I'm looking at. So I'll stick with them. Apparently Eddie Hearn said, no, actually it was nothing like that. It's the fact that he's actually been taken the drug testing from VADA, but he's just not filled out the relevant paperwork. And I get that. Like, again, like, I'm not going to raise two eyebrows, but that I can see kind of... I'm sure certain fighters have done that in the past as well. I think Carl Frampton maybe even had that issue. I think, was it Carl Frampton? I'm pretty sure it might have been him had that issue before, where he said that, like, VADA actually tested him, and for whatever reason I think he said he forgot to fill out some thing or something like that, and he was dropped, but then he was brought back on as well. So we'll see there. But Conor Benn, yeah, we'll wait and see. During the week, Eddie Hearn was actually pretty much saying that I think he said they made Maurice Hooker an offer. So him against Maurice Hooker, when I saw that tweet originally and it said Eddie Hearn and Maurice Hooker, or Conor Benn Maurice Hooker, I thought to myself, jokingly of course, has Eddie Hearn been watching my videos? Because I said that ages ago. I think I even said that before he fought Algieri, because I knew he'd get through Algieri. Algieri is, like, seen much better days 5 years ago, much less now. That he'll get through Algieri, but Hooker will be a name that I think, look, Maurice Hooker really is a 140 pounder. But he's not a bad fighter. He's a decent boxer. You know, how is he around the whiskers? Probably not the best, but, you know, probably not as chinny as someone like, you know, in Algeria at this stage anyway. But I say probably. But he can still box. You know, Conor Benn is really more, like, I always felt Conor Benn is more suited to 140. So this is essentially a 140 pounder against a 140 pounder. If you look at it in that regard, it's going to be tricky. And it's a legit former world champion, albeit at 140 pounds. Yes, at 147, he's not looked spectacular. It has to be said. I do think that if Maurice Hooker can make 140 comfortably, he'll have a lot more success there. When Josh Taylor moves up and vacates them titles, he might pick one up. You never know. He's not beating Jose Ramirez, though. That's one thing for sure. But you never know what might happen. He might get a win over some of the guys down there. So we'll watch the space. I do prefer that opponent, certainly, than I do... Name of the other guy, what was the other guy's name? Robert Guerrero. Much prefer Maurice Hooker as an opponent. If he gets through that, if that fight happens and he gets through that, then we can... I'd like to see him in there against the puncher. That's the one thing about Ben that I don't understand. They won't put him in with any punchers. Like the guys he's beaten, the guys like your Adrian Granados, the guys like your Samuel Vargases, the guys like your Chris Algieri's, not big punchers. You know, I'd love to see what happens if you put him in there with someone who can bang. This is a man, Conor Benn, who's been down against a journeyman, Cedric Payneau. Now, I know with some journeymen, their punching power is a bit deceptive. Like, for example, when I was doing the WTF video on AJ, I mentioned Konstantin Erich. He's a heavyweight, albeit, but he's known to have good power. You know, he is a good puncher. He's just not technical enough to land it. If you want to look at, like, kind of middleweight kind of in there, you look at Darnell Boone, I should say. Great puncher, tremendous puncher. Look at some of the knockouts he's got. Knocked down Stevenson out, but doesn't take a particularly good shot. Defense isn't great. He can't land it consistently. So you have journeymen like that. But this guy Payneau didn't look like that. He just looked like someone who was just throwing arm punches, but just Conor Benn was going down. So I wonder how the old chin is. I had to break from recording there because I got a text. Now normally I have my second phone on flight mode, but it came through on Discord, and AJ, like, I put in the thumbnail because I was actually going to quote AJ here because he only said this the other day on a Stuff TV interview where he was saying, next fight I'm going to beat Usyk, I'm going to go take them belts. And I was thinking, okay, so I was going to talk about that and go, well, like, he's going into the Usyk, and then I get a text to say AJ considering step aside money. Now, Jesus, by the time you watch review of the week, I'll have probably done a video, because I'm going to literally, as soon as I finish up here, I'm going to record another video about that, talk about that in a separate video and upload that tonight, which is Sunday. So I'll touch on it briefly here, actually. Why not? Because Why not? I'll do a video on it, but I'll just touch on it briefly here. If AJ does take step aside money and those rumours, let's say reports, are true, then long term for AJ's career, that is the best thing he can do. Because I'll tell you why. AJ will be hiring a new trainer. We're just literally waiting on the name. Whether it be... Now, I personally, 2 trainers, Bashir, James Ali Bashir, and Stacey McKinley. They're the 2. Right? They're the 2 I would definitely go for. Right? If you're going with those new trainers, having been in your environment that you're used to for so long, going out of that and into a brand new one, I just don't see how you could... I just don't see how that's going to work in such a short turnaround for a rematch for the guy who's beaten you, and you still kind of seem a bit all over the shop about that. I think that was just always going to end in tears. It's always going to end in disaster. If you do it like this, where you take step aside, maybe you wait a year, 16, 17 months, it's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit you in the long run. I'm telling you now. So, if those reports are to be true, then AJ could be doing... Some people might look at that now and say, oh, why doesn't he just take the Usyk rematch? It's like, no, in the long term, we'll look back and maybe we'll be saying, you know what, the best thing he did was take that 15 mil step aside. Best thing he did. Because funny enough, it was saying here, and I was only going to touch on this as well before I stop recording, that the Fury White fight got pushed back again for a 3rd time until Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. So that's off. God knows. Anyway, in other news, that was crazy. In other news, the IBF have reportedly now ruled, having announced, and I was looking forward to this as well, I was thinking it's going to be a great fight, that the Joker-Hrgovic fight cannot take place because of a dispute with Martin Bakole, who insists he's contracted to fight him. Now, I did mention that originally, but I genuinely thought that they would have been able to override that with this, but apparently not. Like, Bakole versus Joker is a good fight, don't get me wrong, it's not a horrible fight, but I would have preferred Hrgovic, definitely, because now you're going to have to go down the rankings again, and like, you got Gassiev, yeah, that might not be bad, but they might go for someone like Azili Zhang. Although, having said that, apparently the IBF have also stated that they can order Joe Joyce to fight. Now, some people would say, why would you get Joyce? Because he's pretty much mandatory all but for the WBO. Well, he's not been announced as mandatory for the WBO yet. He is #1 ranked. Literally, Usyk was the WBO mandatory. That was fulfilled in September. So they don't have to call him mandatory for a time. The IBF is better to be mandatory with them because they are sticklers. Well, I say they're sticklers. The IBF are normally good at enforcing mandatories. But look, they're not always. Like, look at the situation we have at welterweight. 4 years it's been since they called a mandatory at welterweight. 4 years at welterweight. So if there's a situation going on in the division, they won't, like, they're not infallible. The last I can't remember the guy's name, but Errol Spence fought him in Texas, knocked him out in a round. 4 years. I know there have been circumstances, yes, I'm aware, but nevertheless, 4 years. They've not even... See, here's the thing, right? Errol Spence with the car crash injuries and stuff, they've not even named an interim champion or anything like that. It's just been a case of, there's the rankings, there you go, wait. Simple as. So the IBF aren't infallible. They're all... No sanctioned body is infallible. It's the WBA and WBC are just on a different level. Literally, they are on a different level to the other two. But I was a bit pissed off about that because I was hoping we'd see that fight. I was looking forward to that. But we never know. You might get Joyce. You never know. We'll wait and see. But Sergey Kovalev set to make his return to the ring on March 12th in LA against Men Feng Lo. I've seen him. I think he's fought... didn't he fight Frank Buglioni in Monaco a few years ago? And the catch weight is 185 pounds. It'd be Kovalev's first fight in over 2 years. Lest we forget, about this time last year... Was it the end of... Or was it later? Now, I know it was announced in the month of January, but it might have been the end of the month. But he was set to fight Beck the Bully. I think it was a catch weight of 178 at the time. Now, in hindsight, Kovalev versus Beck the Bully, Bekimir Melikuziev, you probably would have favoured Kovalev because Melikuziev, whilst yes, he is aggressive and he can bang, he was knocked out with one punch by Gabe Rosado, who was not the puncher Sergey Kovalev is, and that was down to 168 pounds. Kovalev disputes the failed PED tests, stating that, well, basically it was to do with getting him out of the contract with Golden Boy, because Kovalev fought Canelo, and a stipulation of that contract was, I think it was 2 fights. He would have with Golden Boy, and I think he was entitled to X amount of money. So by him popping, that null and voided that contract apparently, and I think he's actually going on the legal road. If correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he is apparently going the legal road with Golden Boy with regards to that. But that's going to be on Triller, as far as I'm aware. Kovalev won't really have to cut as much weight for that, and Triller, we know. I mean, Triller, but like the commentary on Triller, it's funny. It's funny because it's so poor, you know, because you had Snoop Dogg, De La Hoya sounded gargled. I mean, drunk, gargled. When they done that, what was it? Was it the Frank Mir card, or it was Jake? Well, it might have been Jake Paul, Ben Askren. I mean, the commentary on Triller is so bad it's actually good, if you know what I mean. If you ever get that idea, it's so bad it's funny. You just kind of laugh, and you're kind of like, I listen to it for the humor as opposed to the actual punditry on offer. But Kovalev will be well paid, I would imagine, with the Zone. Sorry, this is not the Zone. Triller, so he's back. Eubank Jr. versus Williams has a rematch clause, Williams has revealed. Both ways or just for one? Do you know something, right? It's Amir Khan, Kell Brook. That has a rematch clause too. I complain about Eddie Hearn, but to be honest with you, it's not just an Eddie Hearn thing. It's going around too much in boxing. Like, I think the whole point of these rematch clauses is that they're hoping that a fight like Eubank Williams, a fight like Cam Brook, a fight like name something who has a rematch clause, ends up being a big deal, that they can maybe do a trilogy on it. I think that there's no need for, like, you've got rematch clauses nowadays in like 10 rounders in some instances. I think they're rinsing the rematch clause out too much. I'm amazed that has a rematch clause in it. So what if Eubank Jr., and I'm picking Eubank to win the fight, by the way, but if he loses and it's a very competitive fight, does that mean Liam Williams is stuck now having to fight Eubank Jr. again? Well, yeah, definitely. But where he might want to go on with his career and vice versa. What if it's a close competitive fight and Eubank Jr. nicks a decision? Does he have to rematch? Like, is it on both ends, or is it just the one? So that's 2 Sky cards now. Ben Shalom and Boxer, where there's rematch clauses in place. I'm a little bit kind of like, ugh. You know, sorry, I'm just a bit like, ugh, why would all the rematch clause? Lastly, Frank Warren has declared that he's made an offer for Joe Smith Jr. to defend his WBO world title against Yard in the UK, so not abroad, in the UK next. He said Smith team are targeting unification with Beterbiev, but Yard is mandatory if it isn't made. So wait a minute. I get the Callum Johnson fight didn't happen, I get that. So they're targeting unification with Beterbiev, right, which, I mean, I wouldn't hold my breath about that. But how is Yard mandatory? He's not done anything. Like, yes, okay, no, sorry. He has beaten Lyndon Arthurs, yes. But that wasn't built as a final eliminator, as far as I was aware. It was a rematch, yes, but it wasn't a final eliminator. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Yard has had, since the Kovalev fight, which was a mandatory fight, he lost to Lyndon, no, he fought Dex Bellman, he lost to Lyndon Arthurs, he fought that absolute cream puff in Birmingham during the summer, and then he beats Lyndon Arthurs. That, to me, that should not grant you mandatory. Shouldn't. You know, I mean, there's not even, like, it was the same thing last time when he got the Kovalev fight. He fought Travis Rivas and then was announced mandatory challenger. I mean, what the hell? He's not even fighting any, he didn't even fight top 10 guys that time. Are they just going to, we've seen it happen with all sanctioned bodies. As I said, with the IBF, they're not infallible. The WBC have announced guys mandatory without even having a win in the last couple of years. Even fighting in 10 rounders, like stuff like that, mandatory, there you go, have your title shot. Same with WBA, same with WBC or WBO. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I think it's an alright fight. Yard versus Smith, I definitely favour Smith. Yard might be, it might look good in that fight, now don't get me wrong. Smith's not going to try and outbox Anthony Yard. Smith can box a bit, but he'll more so try and put it on Yard. And Smith is huge at light heavyweight, so I think that might be something that Yard might struggle to deal with, because Yard is normally the bigger guy in there, but Smith is extremely big, physical, strong, and he hits very hard. Extremely tremendous puncher is Joe Smith Jr. Oh, I wasn't saying Liam Smith there a second ago. So yeah, we'll watch the space with that. In terms of everything else, like, we've got cards on this week. Don King has his card on. Touch wood, it goes ahead. Look, I don't like Don King, but I like the Ilunga Makabu to be some Junior rematch. I'll watch that. We won't review it. I won't touch Don King cards because last year when he had that card, he was copyrighting everyone, and I won't touch that card in terms of reviewing it as in post fights. I'll talk about it in next week's review of the week, but I won't do any reviews on that if it goes ahead. To hell with that. I'm not getting any strikes on my channel in that regard. So I'll watch the space. In terms of that, judging by that announcement with AJ, or that thing with AJ, it's going to be a fun week. It's going to be an eventful week. So we'll watch the space with everything that goes along, and we'll see how it goes. Another crazy week in the world of boxing. That's why we love it. That's why I love talking about it. That's why I love reporting on the news of boxing. It's why we love it. Because there's always something to talk about in the world of boxing. For now, lads and lasses, I'll talk to you. I hope you all have a great week. It's been a good week here in Ireland. And it will be. Things are good. Things are finally... and for the most part anyway, there's obviously a few places in the world where it's still sadly hard for those people. But... things have been good here, and long may it continue. For now, lads and lasses, I'll talk to you. Peace.